In the pre-dawn darkness of March 24, 1603, Richmond Palace lay cloaked in a silence so profound that even the river outside seemed to hold its breath. Inside the royal bedchamber, 3 figures stood motionless, their shadows stretching across the candle-lit walls. The Queen was dead, or nearly so, and what they were about to do would never be written in the official records. Dr. William Manningham, his face pale and drawn, placed a trembling hand on the edge of the bed. Lady Helena von Snackenborg stood beside him, her expression unreadable, her noble bearing giving her the appearance of a statue carved from marble. At the foot of the bed stood a chaplain, lips pressed thin, clutching a small Bible as if it were a shield against the blasphemy they were about to commit. Elizabeth Tudor, the Virgin Queen, the Gloriana of England, lay unnervingly still, her once magnificent frame reduced to a husk, hidden beneath silks and brocade. Her breathing had ceased hours earlier, yet the 3 were sworn to secrecy, charged with examining the body before the court and kingdom could see it. Manningham's hands moved slowly, as though he feared the corpse might spring back to life and accuse him. One by one, he undid the intricate clasps of her gown, peeling away the symbols of majesty that had armored Elizabeth for half a century. The layers seemed endless, stiffened bodices, petticoats infused with perfumed herbs, whalebone corsets that had left permanent grooves in her ribs. Each layer revealed something stranger, darker, more grotesque. When at last they exposed her bare skin, the 3 witnesses gasped. The body was no serene monument to royal dignity, no peaceful vessel of a soul at rest. The flesh was discolored, blackened in places as though charred. Blue-black veins traced strange, almost geometric patterns across her arms and chest. Her hair, once famously red gold, was little more than brittle wisps clinging to her scalp. The teeth that had not fallen out were black stumps. But worse than the visible corruption was the sense of unnaturalness that clung to the corpse. Manningham had seen plague victims, battlefield wounds, and even exhumed bodies. This was different. It was as though the Queen's very humanity had been altered, reshaped into something that no longer belonged to the natural order. Helena crossed herself and whispered a prayer in Swedish. The chaplain muttered that what they saw could not be of God's creation. Yet they pressed on, compelled to document every detail before sealing the body forever. Manningham carefully inspected the torso, noting ribs compressed inward as though crushed. The stomach cavity seemed unnaturally small, the liver pushed high into the chest. Years of corseting had deformed her skeleton, turning her into a living sculpture of political necessity. And then there was the growth, an ominous, purple-black swelling near the left breast, veined and pulsing even in death. Manningham lanced it carefully, recoiling as black metallic-smelling fluid oozed out. It stained the sheets like ink. Some of it seemed to shimmer in the candlelight, almost alive. "This must be burned," Helena said quietly. No one must ever know, but Manningham could not look away. His physician's mind warred with his sense of loyalty. There was something else, too, an anatomical truth that explained why Elizabeth had remained unmarried, why she had spoken of a mysterious impediment. The lower body showed scars, sealed tissue, and what seemed to be an ambiguous arrangement of organs that defied conventional understanding of male or female. The chaplain turned away, gripping his Bible until his knuckles whitened. "This is not a queen," he said in a voice hoarse with fear. "This is a sign." Outside, the first light of dawn was beginning to paint the sky. Soon the court would awaken, and the business of the state would resume. This moment, the unveiling of England's most guarded secret, would be buried as quickly as the body itself. When they had finished, the body was wrapped in cerecloth before rigor mortis could set in. A lead coffin awaited, its lid already prepared to be soldered shut. Manningham signed the sealed report with a hand that trembled, knowing it might be the last honest act he ever performed. As they carried the coffin toward the chapel, Helena glanced back once at the bedchamber. The candles were burning low, casting long shadows that made the room seem haunted. She felt certain that the truth they had just witnessed would follow them for the rest of their lives. The Queen might be dead, but her final secret was alive, writhing beneath the leaden weight of history, waiting for someone brave enough to unearth it. The cold night air carried a strange stillness as he left the courtyard behind. The moon hung like a pale coin in the sky, its light falling across the dirt road ahead of him. His boots crunched against the frost, each step deliberate, heavy with thoughts that refused to settle. The memory of the confrontation in the Great Hall still clung to him. His enemies' mocking voices, the sting of humiliation, the silent vow he had made under his breath. He could almost feel the echo of that vow burning in his chest now. He was not a man prone to hesitation, yet tonight every shadow seemed to hold a question. At the crossroads he stopped, his breath fogging the air. To the east lay the village where the rumors began, where peasants whispered of betrayal and strange alliances. To the west stood the forest, a wall of black trees hiding the old watchtower, a place long abandoned but said to harbor secrets. His hand hovered near the hilt of his sword. East meant answers, west meant danger. He chose west. The forest was not silent. Owls called from high branches, and somewhere in the undergrowth a fox darted past. But beneath these sounds was something deeper. A hum, almost imperceptible, as if the earth itself murmured. He tightened his cloak and pressed forward, branches clawing at his sleeves. The watchtower appeared suddenly, a dark silhouette against the sky. Its stones were cracked, ivy choking its sides, but its door hung slightly ajar as if expecting him. Inside, dust and cold greeted him. His torch cast long shadows across the walls, revealing faded murals of kings and saints. In the center lay a table strewn with scrolls, their seals broken long ago. He brushed aside debris and found a single parchment untouched by decay. The handwriting was elegant, sharp, and the words chilled him. The bloodline must be preserved. The Queen's secret must remain unbroken. He read the phrase again and again. What secret? What bloodline? He had heard whispers of the Virgin Queen's vow never to wed. Yet there had been rumors. Illegitimate heirs hidden away. Powerful enemies silenced. The tower suddenly felt smaller, the air heavier. He shoved the parchment into his cloak and turned to leave, only to hear footsteps behind him. 3 figures blocked the doorway, their torches throwing orange light across their faces. They wore the insignia of the royal guard, though their cloaks were stained and travel-worn. The tallest stepped forward, sword half-drawn. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice like gravel. He backed toward the table, mind racing. They were not here by chance. Someone had sent them, someone who knew he would come. The man's grip tightened on his weapon. The guard spread out, hemming him in. There was no time for talk. With a swift movement, he kicked the table toward them, sending scrolls flying. Their torches flared as the parchment caught fire, and in the confusion he dove toward the narrow stairwell leading to the roof. The climb was frantic. Stone steps spiraled upward, each one slick with moss. Behind him, boots pounded in pursuit. At the top, the night sky greeted him again, wind tearing at his hair. The rooftop was crumbling, sections missing, but it gave him a vantage point. The guards burst through moments later, blades gleaming. Steel rang against steel as he met the first attack. The fight was desperate, each clash sending sparks into the darkness. He moved with precision, but the narrow space left little room to maneuver. One guard lunged too far and slipped, falling into the void below. The others hesitated, giving him the opening he needed to disarm the second and force the third back down the stairs. Breathing hard, he looked down at the courtyard. The fallen guard's torch lay extinguished, smoke curling upward. Somewhere far below, a horn sounded, a call for reinforcements. He could not stay. He leapt from the roof onto a nearby tree, branches snapping under his weight, and landed hard but alive. The forest swallowed him again, but now every rustle felt hostile. He ran until his lungs burned, until the watchtower was nothing but a memory behind him. When he finally stopped, he collapsed against a boulder, heart hammering. The parchment was still in his cloak, its words searing his thoughts. If what he had read was true, then the Queen's entire reign was built on a lie, one that powerful men would kill to protect. His vow deepened. He would uncover the whole truth no matter the cost. But as he rose to his feet, he knew the night had changed him. He was no longer just a man wronged. He had become a man hunted. The dawn broke cold and pale, washing the forest in muted shades of gray. He had not slept. Instead, he had waited, crouched in the shadows until the first light revealed a narrow trail leading deeper into the wilderness. His body ached from the rooftop battle, but his mind was sharper than ever. The parchment in his cloak felt heavier with every step, as though the words upon it had gained weight in the night. Hours passed before he emerged from the tree line and saw the river valley below. Smoke curled gently from a cluster of thatched huts, a small village that clung to the river's edge like a secret. It was here he knew that the midwife lived, the one whispered about in hushed tones. The last woman said to have attended the Queen's mysterious confinement. The night history claimed no child was born. He descended cautiously, keeping to the hedgerows until he reached the outskirts. The villagers eyed him warily, their conversations faltering as he passed. A child darted behind her mother's skirts, and a pair of dogs barked until an old man shouted them quiet. His presence here was noticed, too noticed. He pulled his hood lower and asked after the midwife in a low voice. They sent him to a small house near the river. Its door was half open, a thin plume of smoke rising from the hearth inside. The midwife was older than he expected, her face lined but her back straight. She looked at him with clear, unafraid eyes as though she had been expecting him. "You found the tower," she said simply, before he had even spoken. He froze, hands still on the doorframe. "How do you know?" "Because they will come for you now," she replied. "They always do when someone gets too close." He stepped inside and shut the door. The room smelled of dried herbs and river clay. She poured him water and listened as he recounted what he had read, what he had fought through to obtain it. When he finished, she nodded gravely. "The queen bore a child," the midwife said. "A boy, I was there. But the king was dead, and the court feared what a royal heir would mean for their power. So they hid him away, sent him to a distant monastery. To the world he never existed." The word struck him like a blade. The queen had always been portrayed as unwed, untouchable, a figure of sacred authority. To learn she had been a mother, and that her son still lived somewhere, changed everything. Before he could speak, the midwife's face hardened. "You must leave." "The riders are coming," he heard it then, the distant thunder of hooves faint but growing. He rushed to the window and saw a line of horsemen cresting the hill, sunlight glinting off their helmets. "They will burn this village if they think you are here," she said, thrusting a bundle into his hands. "Go through the river path. It will take you to the marshes." He hesitated. "Come with me," she shook her head. "I am too old to run. My task is done. Yours is just beginning." He bowed deeply, the weight of her words heavy on him, then slipped out the back. The river water was ice cold as he waded across, clutching the bundle to his chest. Behind him, shouts erupted, followed by the crash of hooves as the riders reached the village. From the reeds on the far bank, he watched helplessly as the guards dismounted and began tearing through the houses. Smoke rose as torches were thrown. He clenched his fists, torn between rage and survival, but the midwife's words echoed in his mind. "Your task is just beginning." He turned away and pressed on through the marshes. The ground sucked at his boots, reeds whipping against his cloak, but he did not slow. When he finally stopped to open the bundle, he found a scrap of parchment with a sigil drawn in red ink, the mark of a monastery far to the north. His next destination was clear, but so were his enemies. When he looked back toward the village, the smoke was thicker, black against the morning sky. The riders would not stop until they found him. He wrapped the parchment carefully and hid it inside his tunic, then stood tall, feeling the weight of his new mission. Somewhere out there, a boy carried the blood of a queen and the key to the kingdom's future. And now, he was the only one who could find him before the crown's hunters did. The journey north was merciless. For 3 days he moved through the marshlands and sparse woods, sleeping little, eating less. The bundle given by the midwife was his only comfort, the sigil within a guiding star. Each time he paused, he listened for the sound of pursuit. Though no riders appeared, he felt them close, like wolves circling just beyond the tree line. On the 4th day, he reached the edge of the highlands. Jagged hills rose ahead, crowned with bare trees and rocky outcrops. The air was thinner here, the wind sharper, biting through his cloak. The road became a narrow track carved between boulders, treacherous and silent. It was here, amid the lonely stones, that he saw the monastery's first sign, a weathered carving of a cross on a standing stone, half hidden by moss. But he was not alone. A flicker of movement caught his eye, too deliberate to be animal. He dropped low behind a boulder, hand on his sword. Moments later, a rider appeared on the ridge above, silhouetted against the gray sky. This was no royal guard. His cloak was plain, his horse lean, his bow strung and ready. The rider saw him, reined in and raised a hand, not in threat but in warning. He stood slowly, meeting the stranger's gaze across the distance. "You're far from safety," the rider called down. His voice carried easily in the still air. "So are you," the main character replied. The rider studied him for a long moment, then motioned for him to follow. Something in his bearing, calm, measured, without the cruelty of the guards, made him trust. Though trust was not something he gave lightly anymore. They traveled together through the highland paths until they reached a narrow pass where a small fire burned in a sheltered hollow. There the rider introduced himself. a monk warrior, keeper of the monastery's outer paths. His name was Armand. Armand listened as the main character recounted the events: the tower, the parchment, the burning village. His face darkened as the tale unfolded. "You carry dangerous knowledge," Armand said finally, "and now you are marked. The monastery may still shelter you, but its abbot will demand proof before he grants aid. The parchment alone may not be enough. What more proof could there be?" "There is a reliquary," Armand said, lowering his voice, "hidden in the catacombs beneath the monastery. Inside is the queen's signet ring, kept secret since the night her son was taken. If you bring it to the abbot, he will have no choice but to hear you." The task was clear, but not simple. The catacombs were said to be guarded not only by monks but by ancient wards, traps meant to keep the unworthy away. That night, as the fire crackled and the wind howled over the rocks, the main character lay awake staring at the stars. Every step brought him closer to the truth, but also deeper into danger. If Armand was right, then the monastery was not just a sanctuary but a test. At dawn, they set out together. The monastery appeared by midday, perched like a fortress atop a cliff, its towers stark against the winter sky. The gates were iron-bound, guarded by hooded sentinels who regarded them in silence before admitting them. Inside, the air smelled of incense and stone. Monks passed silently through the cloisters, their footsteps echoing. The abbot received them in a vaulted chamber, his face stern but not unkind. He examined the parchment with care, tracing the sigil with a finger. "This is old writing," he said. "Dangerous writing. If what you seek is true, then the kingdom's history has been built upon a lie. But you will prove it yourself. Tonight, you will descend into the catacombs and retrieve what is hidden." The words struck him like a sentence. There was no refusal. Whatever waited below, he would face it, or die trying. As the sun set, he stood at the threshold of the catacombs, torch in hand, the heavy door yawning open like a mouth. Armand stood beside him, face solemn. "Do not linger," Armand warned. "The longer you stay below, the harder it is to find your way back." He nodded once and stepped into the dark, feeling the weight of stone close around him. The following night wrapped the castle in an oppressive quiet. Vlad stood at the balcony of the east tower, the torchlight from the courtyard below painting restless shadows across his face. His eyes were colder than the stone beneath his hands. He had spent the past 2 days meeting with his boyars, hearing their oaths of loyalty, their pledges of renewed service. Yet he trusted none of them. He knew how easily an oath could be broken when whispered under duress or promise of Ottoman gold. Tonight, the banquet hall had been filled with the perfumed air of roasted meat and spiced wine. The boyars laughed, their jeweled fingers wrapped around goblets as though they had not plotted his death mere months ago. Vlad sat at the head of the table, still and unreadable as his mind turned over a single question. Who would betray him first this time? His spies had brought rumors, letters exchanged in secret, offers of amnesty from Sultan Mehmed, but no solid proof, and yet his gut told him the conspiracy was real. After the feast, he had requested a private audience with the oldest of the boyars, an advisor who had once served his father. The man was escorted into the torch-lit chamber, his steps uneven, the lines of age deepening under the flicker of light. "My prince," he greeted, bowing low. "You summoned me." "Yes," Vlad said, voice low and sharp as a drawn blade. "You were loyal to my father. You know these halls. You know these men. Tell me, should I trust them?" The old man hesitated, his wrinkled hands twisted around his cap, his eyes darting like a cornered animal's. "Some are loyal," he whispered finally, "but not all. There are those who speak to the Turk in secret. They fear your punishments, your methods." Vlad stepped closer until his shadow swallowed the old man whole. "Fear is the only chain that keeps them from tearing this land apart," he said. "If they fear me less than they fear the Sultan, then I must remind them who I am." That night, he ordered the gates of the fortress locked. At dawn, the boyars were summoned under the pretext of swearing new oaths. They gathered in the great hall, some bleary-eyed, others already suspicious. Vlad stood at the dais, dressed in black and crimson, his long hair loose over his shoulders like a dark banner. "You have sworn loyalty to Wallachia," he said, voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "But loyalty is proven, not spoken. Today, we will separate truth from treachery." His guards seized several men at once, dragging them before the throne. Gasps filled the hall. Some protested, others cried out in outrage. Vlad raised a hand and silence fell. These men were seen speaking to envoys of the Turk, he declared. If they are innocent, they will survive the trial of truth. The trial was brutal, not because of gore, but because of its ceremony. Vlad demanded the accused walk barefoot across a bed of glowing embers laid before the hall. The boyars shifted uneasily, whispering prayers. One by one, the accused were forced to walk, their faces contorted in terror. Some collapsed screaming, their feet blistered. Others stumbled to the end, weeping. Vlad's gaze never softened. Those who fell he had executed by hanging before sundown. The others, spared but broken, knelt before him, swearing renewed loyalty with tears streaking their soot-stained faces. That night, alone in his chamber, Vlad stood before a bronze mirror, staring at his own reflection. The firelight glinted off his eyes like shards of steel. He told himself it was necessary, that Wallachia could not be ruled by mercy. And yet, in the quiet, a memory haunted him. His younger brother kneeling in a foreign court, smiling at the Sultan. The image of Radu's betrayal was as sharp as ever. Vlad gripped the hilt of his dagger until his knuckles whitened. He would never be made a pawn again. If he must become a monster to protect his land, then so be it. The night wind swept through the tower, carrying with it the distant howl of wolves, as though the forest itself answered his unspoken vow. The next dawn broke with a chill that seeped into the castle walls. Vlad could sense unrest even before the messengers arrived. Letters bearing the seal of Radu, his younger brother, lay neatly on the oak table. Vlad tore one open with trembling hands, the words scrawled in familiar, mocking handwriting. Radu claimed he had seen the Sultan's favor, promising the throne to anyone who could prove Vlad's weakness. The message was simple: watch your allies. Not all wear loyalty on their sleeves. Vlad's eyes narrowed as he folded the paper. He knew the meaning. Treachery was close. Perhaps closer than he dared imagine. He summoned his most trusted spies, men who moved like shadows, silent and unseen, gathering every whisper, every glint of evidence. The city outside slept, unaware of the storm brewing within the fortress. By midday, Vlad had organized a covert council. Only the loyalist advisors, those whose eyes showed no trace of fear, were allowed in the dimly lit chamber. Candles flickered, throwing shadows that danced like specters across the stone walls. Each advisor was seated according to rank, tension thick in the air. "I have learned," Vlad said, his voice slicing through the silence, "that a threat walks among us, unseen yet present. This threat wears no mask, it wears familiarity. Betrayal can spring from love, from blood, or from the greed of men too weak to see beyond their own desires." One advisor, a man with graying hair and a hesitant voice, spoke up. "Prince, are you certain it is him?" Vlad's gaze was unwavering. "I am certain of many things, but certainty alone does not protect one from the dagger of deceit. We will act, and we will act swiftly." Hours passed in the council as strategies were drawn and whispered. Guards were positioned, secret paths mapped, and false messages planted to lure out traitors. Yet the true test would come with the arrival of a messenger from Radu, pretending to seek reconciliation. The messenger appeared at twilight, his horse exhausted, eyes wide with feigned urgency. Vlad received him in the shadowed hall, the flickering torchlight making the man's sweat glisten. "I bring news of my lord, and of the Sultan's plans," the messenger stammered. Vlad's hand rested lightly on the hilt of his dagger, every sense alert. As the man spoke, Vlad observed subtle tells, finger tremors, irregular blinking, the scent of fear mixed with perfume masking the truth. He interrupted, "Speak plainly. Your words are as thin as the veil between life and death." The messenger faltered, and that was all Vlad needed. He motioned silently to his guards. Within moments, the man was bound and seated, interrogated with precision. Pain was minimal but effective. A whispered name, a hesitant glance, a flick of the tongue. Each clue was a thread to unravel. By midnight, the truth emerged. Several nobles had been bribed by Radu, planning to betray Wallachia to the Sultan. Vlad's spies had intercepted letters hidden in the folds of clothing, messages written in invisible ink, code deciphered by his own scholars. The betrayal was wider than he feared, but containment was possible. Vlad acted decisively. Those implicated were executed in private chambers, the hallways echoing with whispered prayers. Their families were warned, their wealth confiscated, their futures shattered. By morning, the fortress breathed again under his control. Yet the shadow of Radu remained, a ghostly specter reminding Vlad that blood ties could be as deadly as any army. In the quiet hours after the executions, Vlad walked alone to the northern battlements. The moon reflected off the river below, silvering the stones. He thought of his father, of lessons learned in fear and cruelty, and of the necessity of standing alone. To rule was to bear the weight of shadows, to carry the terror of those who would see you fall, and above all, to trust no one, even a brother. The wind howled across the northern battlements as Vlad paced, senses sharpened by weeks of vigilance. Rumors had become reality. Radu, his younger brother, had arrived in Wallachia, ostensibly seeking counsel. But Vlad knew better. Every whisper, every spy report pointed to a man eager to seize the throne. By sunset, a carriage of black lacquered wood and iron wheels appeared at the castle gate. Guards posted along the stone walls tensed, eyes narrowing at the approaching figure. Radu stepped out, tall, lean, his dark eyes gleaming with ambition. A subtle smirk played on his lips, as though he already imagined victory. Vlad met him on the battlements, the wind tossing their cloaks, the river below shimmering with twilight. The two brothers faced each other silently, a lifetime of rivalry condensed into a heartbeat of tense anticipation. Vlad's eyes, sharp and unwavering, studied Radu's posture, noting the slight tilt of the head, the flexing of fingers, the restless shifting of weight. "Brother," Radu said smoothly, voice carrying over the wind, "I come with words of reconciliation." His smile did not reach his eyes. Vlad's reply was calm, a dangerous stillness. Reconciliation requires trust, and trust is earned by truth, not by silver-tongued lies. The conversation escalated into a battle of words. Radu sought to undermine Vlad, questioning his alliances, mocking his vigilance, hinting at supposed failures among Vlad's supporters. Yet every barb was met with Vlad's razor-sharp retorts, a demonstration of his intellect and composure under pressure. The tension on the battlements thickened like the storm clouds gathering above. As darkness fell, torches flickering, Vlad proposed a test of loyalty. "We shall walk the outer walls together. Let your steps speak the truth of your intentions." Each step along the battlement was deliberate, measured, each glance a probe into the other's resolve. Guards lined the parapets, watching silently, their shadows dancing across the stone under the torchlight. A sudden gust of wind sent Radu staggering, and Vlad caught him by the arm. The gesture was simple, almost courteous yet charged with meaning. "Do you falter under the weight of ambition?" Vlad's voice was quiet, almost intimate, but the threat underlying it was unmistakable. Radu recovered, eyes blazing. "I do not falter, but I do not fear your scrutiny. You cannot bind destiny with walls and guards." The verbal duel was punctuated by moments of near physical confrontation. Hands brushed against sword hilts, shadows shifted as both men anticipated each other's moves. Every gesture, every flicker of the eye was a chess move in a game that could cost a life. By midnight, Vlad had discerned Radu's intent. Subtle, cunning, but ultimately reckless. The younger brother underestimated the web of spies, the loyalty Vlad commanded, and the deep understanding Vlad possessed of human nature. The confrontation ended not with steel, but with a silent agreement. Radu would withdraw for now, leaving Wallachia intact, but the threat remained. A lingering shadow of ambition and betrayal. Vlad watched Radu's carriage disappear into the night, the river reflecting the pale moonlight. The castle walls seemed quieter, the night still heavier. Alone, Vlad contemplated the balance of power, the fragility of trust, and the burden of rulership. Every victory demanded vigilance. Every breath could be a trap, and the shadow of his brother's ambition would haunt him until the day either one fell. The dawn was gray, clouds hanging low over the fortress as Vlad paced the upper halls, mind heavy with the weight of inevitable confrontation. News had reached him that Radu had rallied supporters beyond the northern hills, men willing to fight, to die, to betray. Vlad's heart, tempered by decades of fear and cruelty, felt the familiar twinge of anticipation. Every encounter with Radu carried the stakes of life, legacy, and the bloodline itself. By midday, Vlad summoned his council, his closest advisors and generals. Maps were unfurled, detailing the passes through which Radu's forces would approach. Vlad's gaze moved across the faces of those gathered, noting the flicker of anxiety, the hesitation of youth, the hardened resolve of veterans. Each was a thread in the tapestry of strategy, each a potential point of failure or loyalty. "Today," Vlad began, voice low and commanding, "we do not merely defend walls. We defend the soul of this land, the honor of our house. My brother comes not just for power but to rewrite our story. to turn blood into betrayal. Let him find only ruin waiting. The hours stretched, torches lit corridors, and soldiers readied their arms. Vlad moved through the fortress like a specter, inspecting battlements, whispering encouragement, noting every detail. He understood that victory would require cunning as much as force. By late afternoon, Radu arrived with a contingent, banners flapping in the cold wind. The two brothers faced each other once more on the northern battlements, the river below reflecting a stormy sky. Words were exchanged, mockery, threats, subtle challenges, but Vlad, as always, held composure. His calm was a weapon, forcing Radu to reveal impatience, overconfidence. Then the trap was sprung. Vlad had anticipated Radu's movements, setting hidden ambushes along the expected routes, cutting off reinforcements before they could join the confrontation. The fortress became a labyrinth of shadows, of men hidden, of silent retribution. Radu's forces, disciplined yet unaware of the careful planning, faltered. The final confrontation came at twilight. The two brothers stood in the central courtyard, face to face. Radu drew his sword, eyes wild with fury. Vlad's hand rested lightly on the hilt of his own weapon. A battle of skill, strength, and wit unfolded. Blades flashing, sparks flying where steel met steel. Each strike was measured, deliberate, each parry an exercise in precision. Radu lunged with desperation, and Vlad's counter was swift, disarming him in a motion so fluid it seemed choreographed. The younger brother fell to his knees, chest heaving, eyes pleading for mercy. Vlad regarded him silently, the weight of family and power pressing on every breath. "You sought to destroy what is ours by blood," Vlad said quietly. "And yet you faltered. The land cannot survive divided by ambition alone." He offered his hand, not in reconciliation, but as a final test of submission. Radu grasped it, the gesture heavy with both defeat and recognition. By nightfall, the fortress was secured, Radu's supporters either captured, executed, or sent into exile. Vlad walked the empty halls, the echoes of the day lingering. Victory had come at a cost, the constant vigilance, the necessity of cruelty, the burden of a crown heavy with expectation and blood. Yet, in the shadows he felt the certainty of legacy, the assurance that Wallachia would endure under his rule. As the first light of dawn crept over the hills, Vlad stood alone atop the battlements watching the river glint silver. He allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. Power demanded sacrifice, loyalty required ruthlessness, and the line between justice and vengeance was thinner than any sword. The night had passed, the storm had subsided, and the fortress remained, a testament to resolve, to strategy, and to the indomitable will of a ruler forged in darkness and fire.